students, welcome to Tarunayas. Today we will be discussing editorials from The Hindu and Indian Express of 20th October 2022. So let's start. I have taken this editorial from the Indian Express and it is written by our former Chief Election Commissioner S.Y. Qureshi, and he has raised concern with the voter participation. You can relate this article with General Studies Paper 2, Constitutional Bodies and its Functioning. Now, what does the writer here wants to say? So first, let us briefly discuss the background for this news. So, we know that Chief Election Commission, the power is derived from Article 324 of the Constitution of India, and India is a democracy. However, 2 points needed to be noted when it comes to democracy, that India is a parliamentary democracy and India is a participatory democracy. That means after every 5 years, Indian citizens, they vote to elect their government. Now this procedure of voting is basically the part of the procedural democracy, and writer has raised concern with this aspect of the democracy, the participation in voting. He has given two contexts. In order to conduct free and fair election, there should be no coercion on the voters to participate in voting or to decide their candidate to whom they are going to elect in election. Alright, now the context is that recently the Election Commission, they signed MOUs with over 1,000 corporate houses undertaking to monitor the electoral participation. Now what happens, according to the law, an employer is bound to give a holiday on the poll day. Alright, that means so that the citizen of the country can go and participate in the electoral process. Alright, so in order to ensure that all the workforce of an employer, of an economic establishment, the corporate houses, etc., they participate in the electoral process, the commission signed the memorandum of understanding. Alright, this is the first instance that the writer raises, that basically not only will their activity be monitored, but also those who do not vote, their name will be published on their website. Alright, the second instance that the writer gives is that how the Chief Electoral Officer of the Gujarat said that the government, the people who are working in the public sector units and in the government departments, they do not vote, they will also be tracked. That means they will also be tracked. The Chief Election Commission himself said that though the commission cannot enforce compulsory voting, there is no provision of compulsory voting or mandate voting in India. However, the Chief Election Commission says that they wanted to identify the workers in the big industries who do not vote despite availing the holiday. Alright, now the writer, who was the Chief Election Commissioner, the former Chief Election Commissioner, he raised concern with these practices. He says that the Indian democracy demands free and fair election. However, such coercion of notifying the people who do not participate in the election, publishing their name on, with the notice, publishing their name on the website of the company, etc., amounts to coercion. It amounts to a psychological coercion which will not be able to fulfill the mandate of the democracy, that is the fair and free election. Alright. So the writer has raised concern that such practice by the commission itself, it has betrayed the essence of the democracy. Democracy does not mean that that state puts pressure on the citizens to participate in the voting, to participate in the electoral process. The citizen should be inspired. The citizens should not only be inspired, but they should also be educated so that they automatically participate in the election. They have that enthusiasm to participate in the election because they feel that their vote matters. Alright. In India, we follow this system of one vote, one person. That means every individual who vote in the electoral process, their vote counts equally, guided by the principle of equality under the Article 14 and no discrimination. Yes, under the Article 14. That means every vote counts in India. So therefore, the people should be inspired to participate in the electoral process because their vote counts. They should have this feeling of participation, and not such coercion should be employed to raise the participation rate or turnout rate in the political process. So the writer says that it betrays the essence of the democracy. Now, when we discussed democracy in our previous editorial discussion, when we were talking about the inner party democracy, we had talked about that democracy, it has 2 points. One is the substantial democracy. One is the substantial democracy and the other is the procedural democracy. Alright, so procedural democracy is about the electoral process, that means voting. However, the substantial democracy is about upholding the objectives and the principles of the democracy by following the guidelines provided in the Constitution of India. That would amount to the substantial democracy. And however, such practices which is conducted by the Election Commission itself amounts to betrayal of the essence of democracy. It also betrays the essence of free and fair election, because if the employer is going to force such laws on the employee, and so that amounts to a psychological influence. All right, so therefore it betrays the essence of the free and fair election, It is antithetical to democracy. All right, that means it is something you can compare with the authoritarianism. All right, it is violative of the Constitution, because Constitution has given immense right to the citizen under the fundamental rights, and these are the wide rights that citizen enjoys. And free and fair election is may not be directly under the fundamental rights enjoyed by the person, but if we take the example of Article 19, that is freedom of speech and expression, a person is entitled to raise their opinion and raise their concern. So if we are going to interlink this topic with our constitution this way, then the fundamental right is also violated. A person is entitled to not only express their views and opinion, they are also entitled to express their dissent with the government, and they are also entitled to express their dissent with the electoral process also. Alright, so in this context, the writer has given example of the judgment of a Supreme Court in PUCL versus Union of India case of 2013, which included the nota in the electoral process. That means a citizen not only has the right to choose the candidate, but also has the right to not choose any of the candidate if he or she is not justified with their satisfied with their candidature. So therefore, in PUCL versus Union of India case, it was held that the abstention from the voting and negative voting are also protected as a right to freedom of expression under the fundamental right under Article 19. All right. In 2009 also, the court took the similar view while dismissing the plea that sought to make the voting mandatory. Right. You know that fundamental duties, they are not automatically enforced. A law is made to enforce the fundamental duties. They are non-justiciable, right? So a person cannot be taken to the court if he or she does not fulfills the fundamental duties. And right to vote and to vote is a fundamental duty. However, it is not a constitutional mandate or a constitutional obligation on a citizen. It is the choice of the citizen whether to vote or not. Right. So, and the participation of citizen in the electoral process is dependent not only on the idea of democracy, not only on the vague idea of democracy, but rather it is dependent upon that what a normal citizen feels about democracy, what a normal citizen feels about the governing structure of the country. If he or she is not satisfied with the governing structure, they will develop what is known as the apathy. So therefore the writer says that why people don't vote, like what is the reason that people, that the voter turnout is very less. It is approximately to 60%. If we take the example of the Lok Sabha election 2019, then the voter turnout was somewhere 69%. Like considering the population of India, which is according to the census 2011, which is 1.2 billion, then the voter turnout of 69.3% in the Lok Sabha election of 2019 is quite less. Right, we should be expecting that all those who are above the age of 18, right, should be participating in the election. So the next Lok Sabha election, which are due to be conducted in the year 2024, right, the voter turnout should be more than 69.3. Right, if we are going to consider this number, so the people who were less than 18 during 2011 census, they would have reached the voting age by now. So that means they should also be participating in the vote, in the electoral process, in the voting process. However, the writer says there is a political apathy among the youth. And why the youth has political apathy? Because when the youth feel alienated from the political process, we see that most of the political leaders, they are old. Right, so there is a lack of participation from the youth side. We do have the student wings, etc., student political wings in the universities and etc., but that does not amount to the participation, I mean to the level that is expected from the youth. So political apathy is there. So because of this political apathy, there is a lack of participation by the youth in the political process, and generally they prefer to stay away from the political processes. They may not prefer to vote, or they will not even consider that voting will make any change or will make any difference. Right, so the onus is not just on the youth, but the onus is also on the political leadership, that the political leadership of the country has failed to give alternatives to the youth and alternatives to the people of the India, and it's not very encouraging, so that they also enthusiastically participate in the electoral process. The most important point that the writer raises here is the circumstantial inability. Let's take the example of workers, the migrant workers. Now what does the RPA law says? What does the RPA law says when it comes to participation in the election? The normal resident of the place is eligible to participate in the voting, right? He or she gets the voter ID card. Now what about these migrant workers who migrate from their native place to the urban areas, and they are not the normal resident here. By normal I mean the normally residing in that place for more than 6 months, right? So then they become eligible to vote in that particular area. So this is according to the RPA Representation of People Act of 1951, right? So these migrant workers, they cannot go to their hometown just for the purpose of voting. Another circumstantial inability that the writer raises is about the employer. According to the RPA Act of 1951, this act says the employer is obligated to give a day off on the polling day so that the workers can go and participate in the election process. In many of the establishments, this practice is not followed, and in some of the establishments, the employer give only half day off, or only only the time off so that the worker can go and just go and to the poll booth and vote and come back, something like that. So this law is not followed in its true essence. So circumstantial inability is there, right? Ideological preference is there. Like I said, that the people are not satisfied with the political leadership. People have failed to understand the ideological differences. In India, the political parties conventionally are based on ideology. However, this ideological difference are diminishing year by year. So there is no alternative given to the people by the political leadership. So ideological preference has also become a major point. Also, nota is also a kind of a circumstantial hurdle in the voting process. Why? India follows the first past, first post. Alright. Now, according to this, even if there is a 40% voting, alright, and 60% of suppose there is a constituency in which the voting is going to be held. Now, 40% of the people, only 40% of the people have participated in that constituency. 60% of the people have not participated, and out of this 40%, let's see, there were 3 candidates, A, B, C, like that. Candidate A turns out to be the winner, alright, in the electoral process. However, candidate A has only secured 20% vote, and 10% vote are given to the B and C. That means despite getting only 20% vote in a constituency, a candidate is called as winner, right? Therefore, because of the nota also, and because of these reasons that I have just explained, there increases chances that people might not participate in the electoral process. However, this is not the solution. The writer says the solution is not the question. The solution is the education. So writer gives example that how the election commission since 2010 has been taking steps towards education of the voter. But before that, let us talk about the law in this regard. First of all, I have to make one thing clear, that Election Commission of India, which is established under Article 324, cannot, and it does not have the mandate to make the voting mandatory. Alright. Therefore, the Section 79D of the Representation of the People Act of 1951 says that the person has the right to either participate in the voting or to refrain from vote at an election. This is the point to be noted. The law itself says, and the similar provision is also given in the Indian Penal Code Section 171A. That means it is the prerogative of the citizen whether he or she wants to participate in the election or not, whether he or she wants to vote or not. The commission cannot influence the voting process, and the commission cannot make it obligatory or mandatory over the citizen. Right? Because that would be antithetical to the mandate of the commission itself, which is free and fair election. Alright. The Section 135B of the RPA 1951 grants a paid holiday. That means all the employees are mandated to grant pay holiday to their workers on the polling day. However, this practice is not followed. You know that. Employer at best can deduct the salary for those who take leave and don't vote. This is one of the solution that the writer says, that there cannot be any mandate, but however, an employer can deduct the salary without publishing the names of the people who take the leave and don't vote on the notice board. Right? This is what the writer wants to say. In the PUCL versus Union of India case of 2019, which had brought nota in the electoral process, there is one important thing that the court said, that free and fair election is the basic structure of the constitution. It is the basic structure of the constitution, and from where this basic structure of the constitution has been derived, this is not mentioned in the constitution. However, in the 1973 case of the Keshwananda Bharati, the Supreme Court said that the constitution has a basic structure which cannot be altered. despite the fact that the parliament has the power to amend the constitution. It can make amendments in the constitution as and when needed according to the socio-economic dynamics of the country. However, the basic structure cannot be changed. So, and the basic structure, since it has not been defined by the constitution, the Supreme Court of India, which has the power to interpret the constitution, has given you can say has given certain points which may amount to the basic structure of India. Basic structure of the constitution. The first is the free and fair election, the secularism, the federalism, separation of the power, etc., etc. These are the basic structure of the constitution. And it necessarily includes within its ambit the right of an elector to cast vote without fear of reprisals, duress or coercion. That means free and fair election is the basic structure of the constitution. The protection of the elector's identity and afford the secrecy to the electoral process is also included under Article 14. That means the state cannot differentiate between those who participate in the election and those who do not. That would be violative of the Article 14. This is what the writer has to say, that such distinction is arbitrary in nature. An arbitrary distinction between the citizens under Article 14 is the violation of the Constitution. All right. So let's come that what needs to be done. So writer says that the education of the voter is very important. We cannot coerce them into voting. However, we can educate them so as to generate a sense of responsibility and sense of feeling that their vote counts. Alright, so that means the writer says the election commission has started in all states and union territories since 2010, and this SVEEP program of the election commission has led to the higher voter turnout. And the writer gives example that in the Lok Sabha 2019, 67.3% was the voter turnout, and in some of the states it has even reached to approximately 90%, close to 90%. Therefore, the writer says that we have to motivate youth to participate in the democracy, in the procedural democracy. Substantial democracy would also follow, but at least we should be able to fulfill the procedural democracy. The writer says the employer need to create such facility and close their establishment on the poll day. However, naming and shaming of non-voters is not an option. So, which is, according to the writer, is against the essence of the democracy. So if we want to fulfill the objectives of the democracy, we must ensure the free and fair election. However, coercion is not an option, rather education of the voter. So that's it for today. Thank you.